News Talk on Samar News, your go-to podcast for the latest headlines and in-depth discussions. Join us as we unravel the stories that matter most, bringing you insightful commentary and expert analysis. Tune in for a thought-provoking conversations that spark dialogue and inspire action. Stay connected with the news that shapes our world, only on News Talk on Samar News.
Wow, some pretty heavy stuff you sent over this.
Yeah.
It looks like things could be changing in a big way for education here in the U.S.
Yeah, potentially a huge shift.
We're talking about President Trump's executive order that came out on Thursday, March 20th, 2025.
Right.
And it seems like this is the first move in what could be a dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education.
Yeah, that's right. And, with this order, there are just tons of questions swirling around about, what the federal government's role in education is going to look like in the future.
Right. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the sources that you sent was this sort of tension, almost, this contradiction, where on the one hand, the order is saying, we want to, shut down this department. But at the same time, it's saying, well, we're also going to make sure that all of the services that the department provides continue uninterrupted. So
it's kind of like... It's like saying...
We're going to take the engine out of the car, but it's going to keep running.
Yeah. So, just to dig right in here, the actual language of the order directs Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take, quote, all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return education authority to the states.
Great. Return it back to the states.
And from what we're hearing from the White House is that this has actually been in the works for weeks.
Yeah, weeks, they say.
So this isn't something that, kind of came out of the blue.
This has been brewing for a while.
Yeah, and it seems like the big goal here, at least according to what the White House is saying, is that they want the federal government to spend less on public education.
Less money, less involvement.
Yeah, and they're saying that they're going to do that by cutting, quote, wasteful spending.
Right.
But it is important to note that in these sources, nowhere do they actually define.
Yeah, where is the waste?
What constitutes waste?
Yeah.
Right, so we're left to sort of
speculate
about what that means exactly.
What programs are going to be on the chopping block? Right. And all of this, well, of course, they say protecting, quote, critical programs.
Right. So there is a recognition that there are some programs that are essential.
Yeah. And the justification that they give for all of this, I found to be pretty interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
They're saying that, the Department of Education has spent something like $3 trillion since 1979.
Huge amount of money.
Huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Yet they're arguing that, all that spending hasn't really led to the results that they want to see.
Right. They say the outcomes have been less than ideal.
Yeah, they describe them as less than ideal and less than proficient.
So again, what are they using to measure that?
Right. How are they determining, what ideal and proficient even look like? So it kind of leads you down this rabbit hole of wondering, what are they actually basing these claims on?
Yeah, and I think that raises a really interesting point because you have this executive order that's laying out, the president's intention.
Yeah.
But when it comes to something as big as dissolving an entire cabinet level department, like the Department of Education.
Right.
That's not something the president can just do with a stroke of a pen.
Yeah, this isn't like an absolute monarchy or something.
Not quite right. We're not there yet anyway.
Well, I guess we'll see.
But, Congress created the Department of Education back in 1979.
Right.
So if it's going to be dismantled, Congress has to be involved.
So we have this sort of, this intention.
The signal.
The signal coming from the executive branch. But it's going to have to go through this whole legislative process.
Yeah, it's not a done deal by any means.
Right.
And in fact, we're even seeing some clarification coming from the White House itself.
Oh, really?
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has come out and said that, the department isn't going to be completely abolished.
Oh, so maybe not a total...
Not a total wipeout.
Elimination.
But the goal is to make it much smaller.
Okay.
That's the word she used, much smaller.
Yeah, so a significant downsizing.
Right. And she said that Secretary McMahon plans to greatly minimize the size of the department.
Okay, and that does make sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because there are so many really crucial federal programs that are administered through the Department of Education.
Absolutely.
We're talking about Title I funding for schools in high poverty areas, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA,
right,
which provides funding for students with disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
Pell Grants for college students,
Yeah.
the whole federal student loan program. I mean, these are massive programs that impact millions of people.
Millions and millions.
So you can't just, flip a switch and make them all go away.
Yeah. And a White House official has acknowledged that, at least for now, the department would have to continue operating in some capacity to keep those critical programs running.
It makes me think of some of the things that happened during the first Trump administration, where there was this push towards streamlining federal programs and even downsizing agencies like we saw with USAID. Remember all that stuff with Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE?
Oh, yeah, DOGE.
And a lot of those efforts, if you remember, ran into all sorts of legal challenges.
Yeah, they did. They faced a lot of pushback.
And speaking of, downsizing and streamlining, it's worth noting that the Department of Education has already seen a significant reduction in its workforce.
Right.
Over 1,300 employees reportedly got termination notices through these reductions in force that they've been doing.
Right. So that's basically when the government downsizes because of budget cuts or restructuring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is that the department has shrunk from over 4,100 employees to around 2,100 since the start of Trump's second term.
So less than half the size?
Yeah, more than half. But yet, even though it's so much smaller,
it's still responsible for managing all of these massive federal programs.
So less people, more work.
Yeah, it seems
like government efficiency, I guess.
So with all this talk about dismantling, it sounds like these big programs like Title I IDEA, Pell Grants, student loans, these things aren't just going to vanish overnight.
Yeah, what's going to happen to those?
Right.
What is the plan?
So according to Press Secretary Leavitt, for now, the plan is to keep those programs running under the Department of Education. But a White House official did say that Secretary McMahon is working on a plan to bring these funds closer to states, localities, and more importantly, students.
So some sort of devolution of federal power over these programs.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But the details are still pretty vague.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what that would look like.
I also remember from previous reporting that there were discussions about maybe moving the responsibility for student loan payments to a different agency altogether.
Yeah, like maybe the Small Business Administration or the Department of Commerce.
Yeah, exactly.
So taking it out of the Department of Education completely.
Right, but it sounds like something like that would require Congress to act.
Almost certainly because of the legal frameworks that are already in place.
Yeah,
so another potential roadblock.
Let's talk about another big piece of this executive order, which is the directives about DEI and LGBTQ plus initiatives.
Right.
This seems like it's really targeting these specific areas.
Yeah, and the language in the White House summary is very clear on this. It says that any educational program or activity that still gets funding from the Department of Education will not be allowed to advance DEI.
So diversity, equity, inclusion.
That's right, or what they call gender ideology.
Which seems to be part of a larger trend that we've seen throughout the Trump administration to scale back DEI initiatives.
And anything related to gender identity?
Yeah, and anything that they would consider to be related to gender ideology.
So obviously this is a really significant change that's being proposed. And it's important to understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, what's the argument here?
So what are Republicans saying about the federal role in education?
Well, it seems like the big argument is that the federal government has too much power.
Too much influence.
Yeah, too much influence over education policy at the state and local levels.
Right, and this is despite the fact that the federal government doesn't actually control the curriculum that's taught in schools.
Right, and we even heard President Trump himself say that he hopes Secretary McMahon will eventually
put herself out of a job.
Wow. So that gives you an idea of kind of, the end goal here.
Yeah, complete devolution.
And it's interesting because President Trump has been very critical of the performance of U.S. public schools.
Yeah, he's been very vocal about that.
Yeah, he's often comparing the U.S. to other countries, saying that we rank at the very bottom of the list.
The very bottom.
In terms of educational outcomes.
But at the top of the list, in one thing.
What's that?
The cost per pupil.
And I find it kind of ironic.
Yeah.
That a lot of that criticism that he levels relies on data that comes from the Education Department's own research arm.
Oh, that is ironic.
Which, as we just talked about, has been significantly downsized.
So are they going to be able to keep producing that same level of data.
If they're shrinking the very part of the department.
Right. Where does that leave us in terms of assessing progress?
Right. Exactly.
And the president's vision here seems to be to give states full authority over their schools.
Okay.
He's pointed to Iowa and Indiana specifically as examples of states that are doing well.
Doing well in terms of
educational outcomes.
And it's worth noting that he signed this executive order with a bunch of Republican governors and state education chiefs.
Right there at the signing ceremony?
Standing right there with him from states like Florida, Virginia, Texas, Ohio.
So he's got some support.
It seems like there's some support for this at the state level.
Yeah, some powerful allies.
But, when we talk about giving states complete authority, it's important to remember that local school districts and states already have a lot of control over their own educational programs.
That's true. They set their own curriculum.
Yeah, they set their own curriculums. The federal government's role is really more about oversight, especially when it comes to schools that get federal funding.
Making sure things are being done fairly?
Yeah, making sure that there's safety and equal treatment and all of that. So I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, because it's not like states have no power over their schools right now.
Now, what about the reaction to this executive order?
Yeah. How's it been received?
Well, as you might expect, there's been a lot of pushback.
Especially in Congress?
Especially in Congress, the idea of dismantling the Department of Education is facing some pretty big hurdles there.
Yeah, and that's not really a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, any legislation to actually get rid of the department would need support from Democrats.
And that seems unlikely.
Very unlikely, given how they've reacted so far.
Yeah, and even some moderate Republicans in the Senate.
Yeah.
It's not clear whether they would support this.
Whether they'd go along with such a drastic move.
So even getting something like this through the Senate
would be an uphill battle.
Seems like a very tough road.
And there's been talk of maybe shifting the department's offices.
Oh, like moving them somewhere else?
Yeah, to a different part of the federal government.
And would that require congressional approval?
Potentially. Yeah, depending on how it's done.
Okay, so that might be another
hurdle.
Hurdle to clear.
And the Democrats have come out very strongly against this executive order.
Yeah, what are they saying?
Senator Patty Murray called it a wrecking ball.
Wow.
And a blatantly illegal move.
Strong words.
Yeah, she's making the point that Trump knows he needs Congress to abolish the department. So she thinks the strategy here is to basically fire all the staff.
Oh, so to gut it from the inside.
Yeah, basically smash it to pieces so it can't function.
And achieve a similar outcome without actually having to go through Congress.
Exactly. And it's not just lawmakers who are speaking out.
Right.
Aaron Ackerman from the National Student Legal Defense Network.
Oh, yeah. He's a big advocate for student loan borrowers.
Right. He's been very critical of this.
Yeah.
He said flat out that you can't legally eliminate the department with an executive order.
So this is kind of a moot point anyway.
Yeah, he doesn't see it as a legitimate move.
And he thinks the real impact of this is going to be more hardship and confusion for students and families.
Right, more uncertainty and disruption.
And the teachers' unions have also vowed to sue the administration over this.
So it sounds like this is headed for a legal battle.
It seems like it.
Yeah, a lot of challenges ahead.
So for you listening to this,
right, if you're trying to make sense of all this,
what we're seeing is that the executive branch is very clearly signaling.
Yeah, they're sending a message.
That they want to completely change the federal government's role in education.
But there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, but as we've been talking about, the actual short-term and long-term effects are really up in the air right now.
Equally unclear.
Congress would have to act for the department to be fully dismantled.
And there are almost certainly going to be legal challenges.
Yeah, and those could drag on for who knows how long.
Right, it could be years before this gets fully resolved.
So it's a very complicated situation with a lot of moving parts.
And it really makes you think about what would happen if the federal government's role in education was really scaled back.
Right.
Even some of the funding programs continued.
Would that mean that educational opportunities would become less fair?
Yeah. Would some states and communities be left behind?
And would there be less consistency in terms of what students learn?
Yeah. Would we see a patchwork of different standards and approaches?
Right. Because right now, the federal government does play a role
in ensuring some level of equity.
Right. And consistency across different states.
So it's a really important question to consider.
Yeah, and one that I think deserves a lot more attention.
And one that we'll definitely be following closely as this story develops.
Absolutely. This is something that could have major implications for everyone involved in education.
Students, teachers, parents, administrators, policymakers, everyone.
So stay tuned. We'll be sure to keep you updated.
And in the meantime, it's definitely something worth thinking about and discussing.
And doing your own research on.
Absolutely. Stay informed.
Thanks.
You got it.
News Talk on Samar News, your go-to podcast for the latest headlines and in-depth discussions. Join us as we unravel the stories that matter most, bringing you insightful commentary and expert analysis. Tune in for thought-provoking conversations that spark dialogue and inspire action. Stay connected with the news that shapes our world, only on News Talk on Samar News.